All right, well, welcome to our webinar. It's tonight for me, but it could be morning or afternoon for you, so wherever you are, welcome. Today we're going to talk about P6-Loader and how it can make your life easier and let you work with P6 in a more efficient way. My name's Ian Nicholson. I'm VP Solutions at Emerald Associates. I have 25 years of international experience working with P3 and P6 and risk analysis in a number of different industries. Joining me tonight and doing all the heavy lifting is Sue Familia. So Sue also has about 25 years experience. Sue's worked in a number of different industries as well. I'm based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and Sue is in Cheyenne, Wyoming, USA. So let's talk a little bit about the struggles that people have when they're dealing with P6. Now, if you're like me and you've been using P6 for a long time, it's quite possible that you have got so much experience with P6 that you just can't see how anybody could struggle with it. But I mean, we have to kind of admit to ourselves there's things that P6 isn't particularly good at. So the first one is administering P6. So although it's gotten a little better in the last few years, when you create new users and things like that, you can copy from existing users. If you have multiple databases that you have to administer, it can be a real chore to keep them all in sync. Every time you add a user to one database, you've got to add them to all the other databases. We have a client who has about 20 different databases. They're an engineering company and they create a new database for every client so they can give the client full access and not worry about that client seeing other clients' data. But that means every time they add a user to their system, they need to add them everywhere. Everywhere they have a layout that they like in one system, they've got to figure out how to transfer it to all the other systems. Every time they want to change a security profile somewhere, they have to change it everywhere. So it ends up being 20 times the amount of work. Whereas with P6-Loader, they can just pull that data out and load it from one database into the next. The next one is developing projects. You know, quite often it's not that easy to just sit down and start putting activities into P6. You need to enter all your activity codes. And if you're dealing with work package type coding, that can be thousands of activity codes that somebody has to sit down and type into P6. You have to set up your EPS and your OBS and your WBS and all these other structures in order to get things moving. P6-Loader can make all of that very quick and very easy to do. The next one is data integration. Now, one of the things that we always hear from people who work with P6 is that they get frustrated because they can't get the information from their other systems, say their cost control system or their ERP system or their maintenance management system or whatever other system it is. They just want to get information to move in and out of Primavera P6 easily. And it's just not that easy to do. However, with P6-Loader, you can do it very easily because virtually any tool out there will talk to Excel. So you can take all your cost data, dump it to Excel, load it into P6. You can take your work orders from your ERP system, pull them into Excel, put them into P6. It's very easy and very fast. It's also really good if you want to look at a data integration and just see if the workflow that you've planned out is going to work. So before you sit down and do a lot of coding and a lot of development time, you can just sit down and use Excel as your integration engine and see how things are going. The next one is team engagement. As I mentioned before, I've used P6 since the first day it came out in 1999. So for me, you know, getting people involved and expecting the team to work in P6 kind of seems kind of obvious. But the reality is there's a lot of people out there who have never used P6 and don't really have the desire to learn P6. But I still need them to update their schedules, to provide feedback, to do all those kind of things. And the easiest way to do that is to give them an Excel spreadsheet. You want someone to update their activities? Send it in a spreadsheet. Let them update it and send it back. Everyone can use Excel. Everyone knows Excel. We have clients who do all of their weekly updates by dumping into P6-Loader, parsing it out into Excel, splitting it up, sending it out to people. When the Excel sheets come back, they just load them in and they have all of their progress done. It can also be used if you want to look at resource levels or if you want to get feedback on how things are looking. Again, everyone can work with Excel, but not everyone can work with P6. The other thing is consistent portfolios. So a lot of people we talk to these days are very excited about the ability of having a data warehouse and getting Primavera data as to be part of that data warehouse. What they want to do is they want to be able to take that Primavera data, pull it in and use Power BI or any of these other tools that are out there to make dashboards and to give people self-serve data. Um, but there's a couple challenges with that. The first one is you've got to have everything consistently structured and coded or it doesn't work. So if I've got 800 800 different schedules in my database, and now I want to start using my business intelligence software and I want to start giving people all kinds of data, I've got to backfill all of that data. I've got to go in and code everything so that it's all properly structured. And going forward, I need to make sure that all my new projects have everything in them. Now that can be a real chore to get caught up. And what happens is people just get buried in that and they never get it done. So they never manage to leverage all that great data that's in P6. But P6-Loader makes it really easy to back populate data. And you can populate data to baselines as well as current projects. So it's very easy if you want to go and apply an activity code or a user defined field or something like that. Very easy to do using P6-Loader. So let's talk a little bit about how P6-Loader works. So the first thing is when we built P6-Loader initially, we built it with the idea that you'd be on premise. That's virtually the way everybody worked. But over time, we started to see people move to cloud. So maybe they've got P6 in the cloud. Maybe they've got their Office suite in the cloud. Maybe they've got their ERP system in the cloud. Maybe everything's in the cloud. So we developed P6-Loader from that initial API-based tool to a tool that uses either APIs or web services. So if you're in the Oracle cloud, for example, you have Primavera SaaS, P6-Loader can still talk to it because it uses web services and it's fully supported by Oracle. In fact, P6-Loader was the first P6 tool that went on the Oracle Cloud Marketplace. Now let's talk a little bit about the technology. Now there's a lot of ways that you can get information in and out of P6. So the first one I'm going to talk about halfway down the list there, is Sdk Tools. That stood for Software Developers Kit, and it's something that Primavera came out with in about, I don't know, 2004, 2005. And the idea was it would allow you to connect to the database, and you could read the data, and it would validate what you were putting in. But there were some challenges with it. The first thing was that you had to be a admin super user to use it. So if your security profile wasn't admin super user, you couldn't do anything with it. Um, but if you were an admin super user, you could do anything with it. So we couldn't mix and match. We couldn't say, okay, this person's job is to update the schedule. I just want them to be able to update this schedule. You couldn't do it. It was all or nothing. The other thing is that when it's in the 15 years or so since it came out, Oracle has now dropped support for it. It was a okay first attempt, but it doesn't meet any of the normal standardized approaches, which for Oracle means using web services. It did that allow you to write queries and do selective extraction, and you could pull multiple projects at the same time, and it did allow you to access global data. But no security and not supported by Oracle means its day is done. So the next thing that they came up with was this idea of P6 Excel import. So the idea was they have a built-in P6 to Excel writer and reader in P6, but there's a few problems with it. The first one is it only accesses project data. It doesn't access global data. So if you want to manage your users, or you want to change your EPS or your OBS, or you want to import a resource dictionary or a code dictionary, it won't do any of those things. It only works within a project. It does allow you to selectively extract data. It is supported by Oracle and it does do data validation, but it only does one project at a time. So because the P6 Excel import wasn't all that great and it didn't do it very much, some people came out with this idea of these Xcr manipulation tools. So the idea was, hey, I can take my Xcr, I can read what's in the Xcr, and I can change it. Well, you can, but there's a few problems there. The first one is, again, you can't access global data. An Xcr can only contain project data. There's no security around that. If you can import anything, you can import everything. There's no data validation. A few years ago, I had a client that we provide support to call me up in a panic because their P6 system kept crashing. Every time a user would log in, it would get to a certain point, it would just crash. So we did some investigation, and what we found was it was crashing at the same place every time. So it was getting to a certain point in the loading process and crashing. So we went back and started to look at what was going on, and what we found was somebody had just imported an Xcr where the engineering company who was providing a schedule had gone and they wanted to move a code from being an EPS code in their system to being a global code in the client system, and somebody had misspelt the word global. So they ran the Xcr, it brought everything in. No, there's no data validation. Then when P6 would start up and try and read the activity code dictionary, it would come across this value it didn't know what to do with, and it would crash. So it took us probably a full day to figure that out and fix it. So be very careful with Xcr tools. And if you do screw up your database using an Xcr, Oracle will not support you on that. So finally, there's P6-Loader. So P6-Loader allows you to access all of the global data in P6. It follows the P6 security profile. So anything that's in your user profile in P6 is also in your user profile for P6-Loader because we use the same login. Okay, so everything that goes in gets checked by P6 just like you're sitting in front of the keyboard and running the application. The data is all validated by the web services. It's fully supported by Oracle because we use web services. You can choose what you extract, and you can extract as few or as many projects as you want all at the same time. So in P6-Loader, we have different subject areas. The first one is we have global data. Then we have resource and role data. Then we have project and activity data. And finally, we have utilities. So let's talk a little about those. So the global data, we have user info, we have user profiles. I mentioned this before, EPS, OBS, codes, UDFs, cost accounts, financial periods, calendars, currencies, funding sources, notebooks, WBS, categories and documents, risk categories, the risk matrix. Under resources and roles, we have the resource and role dictionary. We have resource codes, teams, limits. So if you want to set your resource limits, you can. Resource assignments, we can do financial period assignments and bucket planning. And at the project level, we have the project spending and benefit plans, um, the WBS, the baselines, and those can be all baselines. They can be the project team baselines or the user baselines, the risks, the response plans and actions, the templates, um, the integration to team member or unifier. And finally, at the activity level, we can edit activities, logic, activity feedback, expenses, resource assignments, steps, all that kind of stuff. So in addition, we have some utilities, and those utilities are activity code roll down, which lets you take a global or EPS code and roll it down to a project code. We can read and write XCRs. If you have XCRs you want to read and check and just pull part of the data out to load in, you can do that. We can run job services. So after you do all your loads, you can reschedule or re-level your plan. We have usage sheets, and usage sheets will show you where something's being used. So a lot of times, we have clients call us up and they're like, well, I don't know. I mean, there's this activity code here, and I don't think anybody's using it, but I'm afraid to delete it because if I delete it, it's going to delete it for everybody. And if someone is using it, they're going to be all upset. But usage sheets will tell you exactly which projects that particular code or calendar is being used in. So it's very powerful to let you see on a code, a UDF, a calendar, exactly where they're being used, so you can decide whether you want to delete them or remap them or what you want to do. Oh, and by the way, we also have the ability in the latest version to move layouts and reports from one database to another. So if you have a whole bunch of layouts that you really like in one database and you want to move them to another database, we can do that. We also can roll down calendars, and we have the ability to control what's in a sheet. So essentially, control what you see on the screen when you're working in Excel. So how do we do this? So the first thing we do is we decide what we want to extract. So we can extract our global data, our user data, or our project data. Then once we've pulled out whatever we want, it could be one project, it could be many projects, it could be one resource, it could be resources and UDFs and activity codes. It can be whatever we want. You just tell it what you want to extract. It can be baselines. So anybody who's ever worked with the update baseline utility in P6 knows how scary it is when you click that button because you really don't have any idea what it's going to do in the background, and then you find out that your baseline is all screwed up. Um, P6-Loader will just treats a baseline like another project. So you can pull data from the baseline, you can see what's there, you can update it, you can load it back in. We also can pull resources and expenses. So you want to pull out the resource assignments and change them, you can do so. You want to pull out the expenses, you can do so. You want to load costs, you can do so. And then when you've got everything the way you want it, you just load it back in. So you just tell it, take this sheet and upload it. You can write macros in Excel if you want to get the data all nicely cleaned up. You can use formulas in Excel, so you can do VLOOKUPs, or you can check for unique values. You can do anything you want to do in Excel. Any of those functions work. And then load it up and you're done. All right, so I'm going to transfer control to Sue, who's going to take you through it, and then I'll come back at the end just to wrap things up. So Sue, I'm going to make you the presenter.
Okay, got it. All right, and I'm just going to share my screen so that we can take a look at how the tool works. Keep in mind that I'm just giving you some food for thought on some of the things that you could do with P6-Loader, because it does handle so much information that there's no way I could visit every single piece, but I'm going to try to do my best to hit the highlights anyway. So with P6-Loader, just like your P6 databases, you can actually uh, point this to several different databases if you have that need. Then once you select it, again, you're going to just use your username and login that you have for P6 itself. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in. And let's take a look at what we can do. First of all, I have my options along the left-hand side, and I'm in my extract options right now. So these are where I would pull information out of P6 that was already there. And as Ian noted, we can look at a myriad of information. We have user topics, we have our global information that we can work with, and roles and resources, um, risks, even. So we can look at risk categories, thresholds, the matrix, anything to do with risk if you're doing that in P6. We have all the project information that you may need, and activity information as well. Now, Ian talked about some of the utilities that P6-Loader has, and he talked about the usage sheets. So these are very, very useful, especially if you are looking at your database and trying to maybe clean up some of the old data that's in there. We all know that as we move forward and work with P6, we have a lot of data that gets created out there. And sometimes that data is no longer used anymore. Maybe we've archived our projects, or what have you. This will allow you to go and see where each type of information is being used, which project it's being used in, as well as if it's being used at all. So this can really help you determine whether a certain code or UDF or whatever can actually be deleted from the database safely without messing up anyone else's data and their information. Now, going along with projects, if I hop up to the top here, what we have on the right hand side is we have the ability to choose any project or projects in our database. So one thing I can do is I could expand all here. I can search on it. I can clear my search and redo it, whatever. So I do have that ability that as I am just going to kind of hop down here and open a few of these up, but we have that ability to see where each one of our projects is based on the EPS that it's actually in. So here's my P6-Loader EPS that I work with. I've got my demo here, and these are the 4 projects that we're going to work with in the demo. So if I wanted to pull something out from those, I could select one project. I could select, several projects, and it doesn't matter if they're even across EPS nodes. I can just choose which projects I want and get them uh, and get that data out for them. So what I am going to do in this one, in my first piece here, is I am going to show, perhaps for those engineering firms that do spin up databases for each one of their clients, so that their clients can work in the database directly. They may want to pull the OBS and the EPS structure out of an already existing database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out the information that is right now residing in my demo database. Once I do that, I want to create an OBS and EPS structure in a brand new database that I have spun up. So this is going to help me get this off and moving immediately with some structures in there. So the way I would do that is I would just choose that I wanted to pull out my OBS and my EPS structures from my P6 database that exists. So I'm just going to go and check mark those and then tell it to extract them. Now, once it's completed, it's going to give me that it was completed successfully. And then I have the ability to download that to Excel and open it up so that I can now work with that data. There we go. So you'll notice that we have some different colors on each one of our column headers here. What this is indicating for my OBS, so I've got a tab for each one of the modules that I selected. I've got OBS and EPS. On my OBS, if I look at this red background column header, P6-Loader is telling me that this is a required piece of information for me to have on my sheet to work with my OBS structure. Now, I also have the ability to remap that required piece of information. So let's say I wanted to rename it. I can use this orangish colored font column to rename that. So if I wanted to actually, change this to emerald or what have you, I can do that here. It's going to go out and it's going to change the name that I have in my database. I have some blue and some gray columns that come out. These are optional columns that either can be in my data in my sheet when I upload it, or I can remove them if they're just maybe getting in the way and I just want to concentrate on a few pieces of information. Now the gray is indicating just some informational pieces. In this case, it's showing me the user that created it, when it was created, the last update that a user did to it. And so it's giving me that information. However, if I just want to get that out of my way, I can certainly just highlight those and I can delete them from my sheet. Now the blue ones indicate that this is data that I can edit, load in brand new, or delete if I so choose. These are the data fields that I can work with. So same thing with these. Let's say I'm not working with my description at all. I could delete that out and just concentrate on what I have left in my sheet. Then when I load it back up, what is going to occur is that P6-Loader is going to actually use the names of these columns to load that data back into my database. Now let's just hop over to the EPS one. In my EPS, you can see that I have several more columns that are required for me to work with my EPS. In this case, I need my ID, my name, and my OBS ID. Same thing with this one. If I wanted to remove some columns, I could even move them around if I wanted to move the order of them, whatever. It doesn't matter what order they're in, they're going to load in to P6 for me. Now, with this data, I want to clean it up a bit, and then I want to load it into my brand new database. So I already have a sheet that I've cleaned up so that you don't have to sit and watch me do that. So on my OBS, you can see that I have two red background columns. Well, one is called cleanup, and P6-Loader does not recognize the header called cleanup. The reason I added this in here is so that I could use what was pulled out from the original database, and I'm just making it all capitals. And so when I load it into my new database, it's going to actually load this cleaned up name for me. And I can keep this column in here because P6-Loader doesn't understand cleanup. So it's just going to skip right over it and ignore that column. I also found that I needed a training and sandbox area in my new database. And when I pulled that out from my existing one, it wasn't there. So I've added those two OBS items into my OBS structure. Now I'm going to go over to my EPS. And again, I've added in those EPS structures that are new. And I've cleaned up a number of the EPSs I want to load in. However, I still have some more that I need to do some work on, but I want to get this database up and going. So what I've done is I've added a blank line between the data that I want, or a blank row. I've added it between the data I want to load and the data I don't want to load. So when P6-Loader hits that blank row, it's going to stop loading information and it's going to ignore everything underneath it. So essentially, I'm ready to load this up into my brand new database. So I'm going to go back to P6-Loader and I'm going to log out so that I can log into the database that is brand new. So I'm going to go and select that new database, and I'm going to use my admin one because I've just built it and I don't have any users out there. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in, and now I can upload. The second option on my left-hand side is where I upload any file that I'm ready to load into P6. So I can click to this upload. I can go and browse to the file that I want to select. I can select it, open it, and then I can upload. It's that simple. It's going to go out. It's going to handle those few pieces, or those two worksheets that I had. And when it's done, I can go into my new database. I can refresh my data. And I'm going to be able to see that I now have my new OBS. And I forgot to show you that I didn't have any EPS, but trust me, there was no EPS structure here. And now it's loaded in my new structure that I wanted to have to create my database. So this is a really fast way to spin up a database and get people working in it if you have that need. Now I'm going to go and let's take a look at one of our utilities. So in my demo database, this is the one I'm running in the client. I have a project that I have assigned some activity codes to. Now, these activity codes are at some levels that I really don't want them at. This phase code really should be at my EPS level. This is only important to the particular EPS in which this project resides. I've also found that I have two equipment codes that have been assigned to my project. However, they're in two different levels. They're in two different lists or dictionaries. I have global and I have EPS. Well, I want to keep these, but what I need to do is combine these. And then I want to actually have the new code sit at my EPS level because my equipment number, again, is important to the projects in my EPS. For my specs, again, I found two, and they've both been assigned in this project. So I want to combine these, and my specs are only important to my project. So I'm going to push these down to the project level. And the same goes with my work order. My work order is only important to this one project. So I want to actually push that activity code down to the project level. Now, in P6, they allow us to promote those up the line, but they do not allow us to demote them down. So I'm going to do that with one of our utilities. And that utility is called the activity code roll down. So I've taken my phase code, and it was originally global. And I'm going to say, I want to push that down to my EPS node. And then I'm going to give it a new name so that we can just kind of track it a little better. And then I'm also going to tell it what EPS I need it to be associated with. In the case of my equipment, remember I had two different lists at two different levels. I'm going to put my original code in there. I'm going to put that I want it to be pushed to the EPS level. And then I'm going to put the same name on both of those codes. And what P6-Loader is going to do is it's going to combine those lists into that new list and reassign those codes in my project for me. So I don't have to go out and create this code and then reassign it everywhere in my project. Again, telling it where that EPS that I want to have it reside in. Now my specs, I'm pushing down to the project level, and I am going to combine them by naming them the same thing, giving them the same name. And because it's a project, I want to assign what project it's going to be associated with. And then finally, my work order. I just want to push that down from the global to the project level, and I want it to be in this project. Now this last column is telling P6-Loader, what do I want to do with that original code? Do I want to keep it where it is? Maybe I want to make sure that there's no other project that has that code assigned to it before I delete it. Or maybe I'm confident enough that this is the only place that is being used. So in the case of my work order, I know that it's only been assigned in this particular project. So I'm going to go ahead and have it delete it at that level. So the rest of them I'm going to keep and just make sure that they're actually clean before I delete those codes. So I'm going to go back to P6-Loader. And again, I want to get in the proper database. So I'm going to log out, and I'm going to go to my demo database. It helps if I click the right one. And I'm going to sign in and then just browse to the file that I just showed you and select it and upload that sheet. So it's going to go out and it's going to work on rolling those codes down to where I asked it to. and reassign them in my project. So I am completed. So I can go into P6 again and I can refresh my data. That's going to go out, it's going to grab the new data from the database and bring it in. So I can see that I no longer have those messed up codes assigned in my project, which is okay because that's what I wanted it to do. But I need to go and find the new codes. So in my EPS, here's my phase. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring my phase over, and I'm also going to bring my equipment over. Now, remember, we pushed them down to the project level. And here I have my specs and my work order. Now, if I go up to my global codes and I take a look at some of the ones that I had previously, you'll notice that if I go down, well, or if I go and look for my one P6L work order, it's no longer there. So it has removed it at that level. So I'm going to just say okay and apply this. And now I can see that my phase code is pushed down as well as reassigned. My equipment code is now combined. The two equipment code dictionaries are combined and reassigned. Not very nice. So I don't have to go out and do that manually. And then for my specs, they are also combined and assigned. And then, of course, my work order was just the same data was kept, but now it does reside at the project level. So really, really easy, some really great tools to clean up your database with P6-Loader. We also have a calendar roll down sheet as well. So that actually can be very helpful, especially if you've imported projects from other companies that had global calendars in them, and now they are in the middle of your actual company calendars. So you can work with them as well. So the next thing I want to do is I want to show you kind of the whole gamut of some of data that you might want to create when you're developing a project. So I've got a project that I'm getting ready to work on here. And I'm just going to open that up and we're going to take a look at the first the activities because it's automatically going to take me there. And I'm going to change a layout, but this is going to be empty, of course, because I'm going to create everything I need for this project with P6-Loader. Another thing that I'm going to create is I have some resources that I need to add in to my P6 in relation to this project. And so I can assign those and have them used with my project. So I'm going to load those into this P6-Loader parent in here in the resource area. So I'm going to go and show you what it might look like. And keep in mind that you don't have to load these all at once. You most certainly can load them as you get them. But in my case, I have all the information I need, and I'm going to do it all in one fail swoop. So I have my WBS, the structure that I'm starting to build out. I've got my parents that are here, and I have children under several of the parents that I have that I'm nesting in, and I'm creating that hierarchy for. Um, I am able to set all those different pieces and parts of my WBS that I might want to set. So as I scroll over, I've got my earned value information, my estimate to complete, all those things that you might want to set at that WBS level. Now, in developing this project, there are several project codes that I need to create in relation to this project. So this is a two-part process. First of all, I need to create my activity code. So I've got my activity code created here. I've put a scope on it. I've put the project ID that it's going to belong to, and I've given it that length, and I've uh, specified what that length I want on that activity code. Now on this second sheet, this is where I would start developing my dictionary. So you can see for my discipline, I have several dictionary values along with their description that's going to come in. For my area, I have just a couple dictionary values. And then my work packages, I'm actually building those out and assigning those in my activity code dictionary. Now, of course, once we have our WBS, we're going to want to start building out our activities. So in this sheet, what I've done is I have added a column called title because I am going to use this title as well as two of my new activity codes that are being assigned. So I'm assigning my area here as well as my work package. And I am going to concatenate those to help me build the name of my activity. So I've made it, told it that I want it to be uppercase, and I am going to concatenate G, H, and I on this row. Now I don't have to go and copy these and paste them in as values. P6-Loader is actually going to take the resulting value of my formula that I have here and load the value. So I don't even have to go that extra step and copy and paste his values here. I can just use it just as it is. Now I have some activity expenses that I need to assign on a couple of my activities. So I've set those up here and put my price per units, my planned cost on it, um, set my accrual type, everything I needed to for those activities. I've even assigned a cost account to it. However, I don't have the cost account structure in my database, so I'm going to build that as well. And P6-Loader, no matter what order your tabs are in at the bottom, it's going to load them in the order that it can assign for instance, it will create my cost accounts before it tries to assign them to my expenses. So it'll take care of that as well. So I've built out my cost account structure. And now I have a couple of activities that actually need some steps in them. So what I see here is that I have a couple that are iterative. It's the same type of activity, and I have the same steps on a couple of those activities. So again, could use some of the simple functionality of Excel to help me start just building out those steps in there. And then I could simply come in and change my number for my activity and load it in and not have to retype all this or copy and paste, every single piece of information here. So as I'm going to build out my resources, and for this particular project, I need a specific resource calendar. And this resource calendar is actually a 10 on, 4 off rotating calendar. So with a calendar, it's a 3-part process. First of all, I'm going to define my calendar and say what type of calendar it is. And then I'm going to put in, my hours per day, month, week, etc. That's going to create my calendar. Now in my next sheet, I'm going to specify what days of the week and what hours of the day this calendar is going to handle. What's my work time? Then on my exceptions, I can then say, okay, what days off are they going to be? So I've started with my first day, and then I've used a formula to calculate my next 4 days that need to be off. Then I'm using my 11 days to start my next series. Now, if you've ever had to go in and do a calendar like this from scratch in P6, it takes a lot of clicking the right boxes and highlighting the right boxes and putting, exception to work time on that. It's very easy to mess that up, especially if it is something like a 10 on, 4 off. Maybe you count wrong or something of like that. you may have to start all over. And so it really can be difficult to set those up. P6-Loader makes it really easy using some of the functionality of Excel to help you out. Now, I've also found that I need a new resource code. So I'm creating my resource code here, and then I am going to populate that. And I'm even able to build out a coding structure here, or a structure here in my codes, so I can have a parent with children as well. So now I'm ready to start developing my resources. I have my resources out here that I need. I'm I'm assigning that new resource calendar that I just created. I'm also using some of the resource codes that I need, including that brand new one that I decided I needed to keep in to add to my database for this project. So again, if you scroll over, a lot of these sheets have a lot of data on them because you're able to touch any piece that you would be able to work with in P6 itself. So I've developed, or I've set up my resources, and now I'm able to assign them. So on each one, I have my project ID, my activity ID, and then I have my resources, my roles. I could even do cost accounts. And I'm going to start planning for these particular resource assignments. So I've got my plan duration, my units, my costs, and my planned units per time. So I've got those all there and ready to go. Now, of course, what is a project without some logic through it? On this last sheet, what I've got here is I am uh, developing my relationships within my project. I've got my project ID and my project, or my predecessor project ID and my predecessor activity ID, as well as successors of both of those. So I can even do cross project relationships, define them here, and be able to assign those. So if I had a contractor schedule that I got in every month, and I actually just tied key milestones to to a master project, I could actually retie that new schedule from my contractor into my master with P6-Loader. And so I don't have to go in and reestablish those every time. I could keep those in a file where I actually had them already and could just simply load them and reattach that new project. I can also define my type, as well as define lag. And sorry, lastly, this is where the resource rates, where I could assign resource rates to particular resources. I can even pull them out and give them different rates depending on what kind of project I have. If I have different rates for a certain type of project or a certain type of activity. I can even put those on shifts as well. So I have, my 7 o'clock shift and my 7 a.m. shift and my 7 p.m. shift. So I can work with those as well. So essentially, I've tried to touch on everything you might want to do in developing a project. So I'm going to go to P6-Loader, and I'm going to upload now all of that information and create it with P6-Loader. So I'm going to get that file and I'm going to upload it. Now, once I go to upload and it is complete, again, I'm going to go out to P6 and refresh my data so that I can get that new data from my database into P6. So let's keep an eye on that P6-Loader parent there, and we're going to see where those resources have come in and where it's assigned my new calendar there as well. And if I go into my activities, I can see that I've built out my WBS. My activities are there. I've got calendars. I've got original duration. I've got my my steps on those couple that I wanted to put steps into. I've also got logic, my resources, roles, cost accounts, and have started my planning for this project. So again, so many things that you can work with in creating projects. Now, not only is it nice to be able to create a project, but we also, once we're ready to get started on it, you baseline. And sometimes your baseline, you've needed to take it, you needed to get those values out there for your baseline. However, maybe you've found later on that you need to readjust some costs. Maybe you've got some found work that you want to add into your baseline so that you can use that for your earned value calculation. So I have a project here that has a baseline, of course, associated with it, and it also has the project itself with that information. I'm going to resort this by activity ID. Now we found some work that I want to add in, and I'm going to make that put that between 520, and I love it when it does this, between 520 and 540. I'm going to add activity 1530 into here. And then also on a couple of my activities, I need to redistribute my units and my costs. I found that, I don't need to change any, costs per se out there, but I do need to redistribute it out. So what I can do is I can extract my baseline information without detaching it from my project, and I can add it. I can move those costs around, and I can add in my found work. So I've done that. I've pulled out my baseline um, project with its activities, as well as I can do this on the same sheet, on my activity sheet, as well as I'm going to add my found work. So I've got my found work that I'm adding into both my project and my baseline. Not adding anything onto it, no costs, no units, anything like that. But I do want to get that into both my baseline and my project. Now, in the case of where I want to redistribute some units and costs, what I did is I pulled out, and what I pulled out of P6, I've actually renamed my original planned labor. Now, I'm just going to use this other column to debit and credit um, the ones that I need to. And then I'm using this planned labor cost, which is what will load back in because P6-Loader understands planned labor cost. And I've used a formula so I don't mess up my calculation. And I've done that with 4 of my activities. I've just redistributed between 2 activities each. Now, I wouldn't have to actually load in all the rest of these activities because I really only need to change the ones that I have here. So what I could do is I could actually I could go out and I could filter this by color. And all I have to do, I would have to remove the other ones, of course. I would delete those out. But this is what my sheet would look like if I deleted everything but what I needed to log in or to load in. So essentially, it would be only loading 6 rows in here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to load this up and show you how it changes my baseline and my project. So I'm going to go to upload and load my baseline, changes into it. And I look like I'm kind of cutting short of time, so I'm going to try to speed it up a little bit here. Go into P6 and F5. And now I can see where I've redistributed my costs on those couple of activities. And my activity 1530 is now added. And I can see that it is added work because I set that work scope in there. Now, finally, I'm going to try to hurry through this a little bit. I want to show you how we might want to update activities that we sent out a P6-Loader sheet to our users for. So I'm actually going to work with two projects here, and I'm going to update both of them at the same time. And not only am I going to do that, but I'm also going to put some of my resources, actual units, into different time periods. So I'm going to do some put them into some separate buckets. So I've essentially pulled out my two projects, and this is, and I've cut it down, which I can do and save in P6-Loader so that I can do it every time. I don't have to go out and remove all of the columns that I don't want to. I can save it like this and then just pull out this information from my projects every time I want to send out an update sheet. So what this is the one that I've gotten back. So I can see that I've got completed, my percent complete. I've got my actual start on both of my milestones here. I've got two activities that are in progress, one in each of the projects, and I've got a different percent complete on each one of those. I've got my actual start in there, and I've kept my planned and start and finish dates there so that it's easy to copy and paste those over if I don't need to change anything on those. I've also gotten um, some time period information for some of my resources. So I've got my earthworks here that I have different units in May and June, and then I've got all of my resources on this FS or F spread 3 that are going to be all put into June. So I'm going to go up and quickly load this so that we can see those updating items that do come in. And it does work fairly quickly. I know that this is a small project right now that I'm working with, but even on larger projects, it does work quickly and pretty efficiently to do all this. So now I've got my status reflected. And if I go into each one of my activities, I can see where I have my May and my June for my earthworks there. And then on all of my resources on my other activity, I have all those units entered for June. So I'm going to quickly give it back to Ian so that he can do just a really quick wrap up of what's going on. And thank you for allowing me to go just a little bit long.
Thanks, Sue. All right, I'm just going to wrap things up. If anybody has any questions that they would like to ask, feel free to put them in the questions section on the chat, and we'll make sure we get them answered. So, uh, just some customer feedback that we get from some of our customers. Now, we have people from very small customers to very large customers. So from, one or two man operations on a job site somewhere up to multinational corporations all use P6-Loader. And the ones we like to have to see are the ones like down the bottom where somebody says, I finally got P6-Loader. I wish we did this 2 years ago. This is somebody who we tried for 2 years to sell the tool to, and eventually she purchased it. And then she was saying, and she just says how much she loves it and how much easier it makes her life. Um, a lot of people say, this is a tool you got to have if you're working with P6, particularly when you're working with large data sets, because it just lets you do things you couldn't otherwise do. We had one quite recently where we had to change all the resource assignments in an activity that had progress. Well, P6 won't let you change resource assignments if there's already progress on them. You have to remove the progress, then you can remove the resources. And we needed to remap all of the resources in a turnaround schedule of about 60,000 activities. So in this case, we could do that with P6-Loader. We could download all those, delete them all using P6-Loader, and change them and reassign them all in a matter of a couple of minutes. And that's one of the other things. Sometimes when you want to delete stuff from P6, like resource assignments, it can be really slow and tedious to do it. P6-Loader lets you do that right from the tool. A few of our clients. Um, we have clients, as I mentioned, all over the world. Some are very large, some are very small. Some are in the defense industry, so we have quite a few defense contractors and government agencies using P6-Loader. And Emerald is a full-service Oracle Primavera shop. We have tools. So we talked tonight about P6-Loader, but we also have a P6 QA, which makes sure that you have properly developed schedules. Um, we have scrubbers. We have all kinds of different tools. We have updaters, all kinds of different things, and they're all on our website if you want to take a look. And we've been a Primavera partner since 1995. We've been a Platinum partner since 2009. We're all over the world. So I see there's some people have their hands up. If I can ask you to just put your questions in the questions section, then we can get those answered. It's probably easier rather than trying to get people unmuted and all that sort of thing.
I think what you're seeing is that Donna is chatting to get some
Okay.
feedback. So
Okay.
they aren't actually hands that are risen.
Okay. Thanks. All right. So if you do have any questions, I'm going to put our contact information out. So Sue's contact information is here. If you would like to reach out to Sue, she can answer any questions that you might have about how P6-Loader works. Also, Donna, who is our representative in the Asia Pacific region, is also online. Her number in the Philippines is there, and Donna can answer any questions that you might have in your time zone. So again, if you think of anything you'd like to ask us, please feel free to reach out. We're always happy to answer questions and talk about use cases. We have clients who contact us with a very specific requirement, like, how can I do this or how can I do that using P6-Loader? And we're always willing to talk about P6-Loader.
And
So go
Donna,
ahead, Sue.
I was just going to suggest that Donna maybe put her email in the chat so that everyone has it in case they want to contact her via email.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we should actually have put that on a slide, but we did not. So, all right. So, okay, Donna's email address is in the chat, so you can always reach out to Donna or to Sue, and we'll make sure we get your questions answered. And I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening, or this morning, or whatever it may be in your part of the world. And thanks very much for attending.